And Oliver.
And we are two members of Super Geeked. I'm gonna cut that out. So we are here to make a special video for you of not our top 5, but 5 albums that influenced us when we were teenagers.
Yeah, and these are coming in no specific order, so they're not ranked by importance. They're just there. So 5 albums. Yeah. And the criteria was that we had to have them on vinyl, right? So they had to be vinyl. Now, this doesn't mean that at the time that they were important to us, that we were listening to them on vinyl. It's just that we had those albums. And now the criteria is that now we have them on vinyl.
That is so confusing. So
I tried.
Basically, it's 5 albums that influenced us, gave us the feels, even when we listen to them today, reminds us of that time period.
The feels.
Yeah, you know, that's what the kids say. So
they don't say that.
They give it. Shut up. Okay, so do I get to start?
Yes,
I feel
please.
And I have I have notes. So here's my notes. So first album that I have is Propagandhi. Let's Talk More Rock. So this album was important to me and still is important to me because punk rock and hardcore and that scene taught both of us, and I think most of our friends, a lot about morals and ideals that we still carry with us today.
And a social consciousness.
Yeah.
Consciousness.
So if you can see the album, it says animal friendly, anti-fascist, gay positive, pro-feminist. So this wasn't new ideas for people in the punk rock community because we pretty much all lived and breathed that, but it was, you know, just a straightforward album about classism, sexism, homophobia, and things like that. And the album is amazing.
Yes, it is.
If you don't know who Propagandhi or Propagandhi is, they are a band from Canada. They've been around since the early 90s, I think late 80s maybe.
Late 80s.
And they, they're still amazing today. I love them. I still listen to them. So something really cool about this album is that at the time this album came out, John Samson was in the band and he went on to start the Weaker Than. So there's a couple of songs in this album that he sang on. And they totally, you know, sound a little different than the rest of the songs on the album. So anyway, this is a really cool album. We actually got to see Propagandhi on this tour.
Great show. In
New Orleans at this place called the Fallberg Center, which is now defunct. And it was really fun. It's funny this album is called Let's Talk More Rock because I think the entire tour, they stopped the show to go on a political rant. So, we got lucky. I don't know if we were lucky, but they got naked during our show in New Orleans. And yeah, that was a different experience. So,
I don't think it was that exciting, but okay.
Maybe not for you.
Yeah. I remember Jeremy was really excited by that.
So yeah. So anyway, this is my first album.
And mine is Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. You can't really see it. I'm going to take that off because there's a glare. Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. So let me just say that this came out a long time before I was actually a teenager. This album...
He was in high school. He's ancient.
I'm going to kill you. This album was very influential. However, the album that was out at the time, I think that I listened to more than anything, was No Prayer for the Dying, which I do not have on vinyl. So I went with another Iron Maiden selection. I have every other freaking Iron Maiden album. So if anybody wants to get me No Prayer for the Dying for Christmas, totally into it. Anyway.
You're not supposed to solicit our viewers for gifts.
Send it to me anyway. So anyway, Discog, just saying, I'm on there. So anyway, this is an incredible album, nevertheless. With songs like Run to the Hills, which was always one of my favorite, Children of the Damned, The Prisoner. It's a great album, and it's sort of solidified my love for this particular genre and other genres as well, because they sort of dabbled in that horror aspect, I think. I think that Iron Maiden was definitely...
More like sci-fi.
Well, yeah, sci-fi horror, but they were on the cusp of that. They were really doing something in metal that nobody else was doing at the time. When you consider that, other bands like Judas Priest, they had a little bit more of the sort of occult influences and things like that, and it was very controversial at the time. So my first selection, Iron Maiden, Number of the Beast.
Yes. All right. And so next up, I have the Misfits. So obviously, talking about metal, a lot of metal bands have been influenced by the Misfits.
Absolutely.
And a lot of, everybody was influenced by the Misfits, really. And
that's true.
So when Static Age came out, I was in high school. Obviously, I'd heard most of these songs. Obviously, I already knew who the Misfits were. But this album is different because obviously a lot of people, I keep saying obviously, might not be obvious to everybody, but the Misfits are known to be horror punk. That is their genre. But this album is a lot more punk rock. They never put this album out. It was recorded in 1978, and then they never put it out. And so it did come out. They did the box set in the 90s, and then that precipitated them actually putting this album out. And so most of these songs we'd all heard. Danzig had recorded some of them, where he just played everything on the album or the EP. And so anyway, the Misfits. How could we not include the Misfits?
Absolutely.
The Misfits are, so influential to us. One of the reasons that we started going to live shows again is the Misfits got back together the first time since 1982, and they played at Riot Fest in Chicago. And Oliver and myself and my husband Joshua all drove up to Chicago to go see them. It was an exciting weekend. We got to see tons of bands that we had loved since, forever. The Descendants, Bad Religion, Social Distortion. And it was just a fun trip. What do you think?
It was absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Some of the bands we got to see.
It reignited my love for live shows. There had been a time period where I stopped going to shows, and it was a lot of fun.
I agree with that. That it had the same effect on me because it seems like it had been a while. Like I had gone to a few shows here and there, but nothing. It sort of reignited my passion for the music. And so it was definitely a game changer.
And one of my favorite Misfits songs, Hybrid Moments, is on here. So
actually, one of my favorites is on there too. Actually, two of my favorites. So I've always been a big fan of In the Doorway, which they did not release on. It's never shown up on anything else other than on this record.
Yeah.
And also Theme for a Jackal. Theme for a Jackal I really love because it, somebody kind of clued me in that was an attack on Ted Kennedy, and when you look at it through that lens, it's kind of cool actually.
Do you remember what their encore was? Attitude was one of their...
Yeah, it sure was. And they didn't do that. One thing that was kind of cool is like they played Colorado first, and then when they played Chicago, and that was Attitude was one of the songs that they didn't get in Colorado, so that was kind of special that we got that.
Because we stood in one spot for 6 hours.
6 hours.
Did not tinkle, did not give up our spot so that we could have full-on view of, the Misfits.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of bands on both stages waiting to see the Misfits. So that was a great show.
That was definitely exciting. So, piggybacking off of Victoria's last pick, I chose the Misfits. This is collection 1. So I'm going to take the sleeve off again so you can kind of see it. Anybody who knows anything about the Misfits has this record, or like you say, anybody who's cool has this record, right?
Oh yeah, anybody
Yeah.
does that album. But I'm only saying that because we own the album.
Yeah, and this is collection is a little bit sort of piggybacking off of Static Age. Now, Static Age, like Victoria said, was a little bit more punk rock, had a social consciousness. Anyway, it was a little bit more. It had something to say socially, and I think that this was a little bit more. This was a collection of their entire career, so you've got everything basically from early Misfits like She, and then it goes all the way through to like Earth AD type stuff with Wolf's Blood and Devil Lock and Earth AD and things like Green Hell, which was heavily a lot of the thrash bands and a lot of the early metal bands and things like that were really heavily influenced by that album. But this was definitely this shows their horror, sort of their horror side there. You got the superimposed picture there, Glenn Danzig with the Crimson Ghost.
You should get that tattooed on your face.
I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
I? But this, like I say, I also chose the Misfits. This was very important to me. I was the weird kid walking around the quad at school, in high school, that would jump up on top of the picnic tables and shout out Misfits lyrics. Even though years later, come to find out when the box set came out, that I was misquoting them. So, Glenn Danzig, please don't put a demon on me. I'm sorry. Sorry, Glenn. Don't kill me. Don't curse me either.
Okay, so next up, this is a departure from the Misfits, but my next album is Sunny Day Real Estate Diary. We were going to shows, we saw a lot of underground bands, but around the time I started going to shows, I found out about this band on, I believe, 120 Minutes, which was a show that aired late night on MTV. And just to kind of like give you an idea, during that time period in the 90s, they had major labels, then they had these sub-labels that were actually owned by major labels. And so you had these kind of in-between bands that had the money backing that the major labels had, but they weren't mainstream. They weren't on like mainstream radio and things like that. So you could see these sort of bands like on 120 Minutes. So there was sort of like these levels. There was like DIY underground music that we saw where bands were recording their own albums, creating their own record labels, and then you saw these labels that were backed by major labels, but they weren't bands that were like on heavy rotation at radio stations and things like that, or on regular MTV. So anyway, one of my favorite lyric lines is on this album, and it's, I dream to heal your wounds, but I bleed myself. Tell me that's not fucking emo.
That's emo.
So, and that's also to say, emo is a lot different now, like people's idea of what emo is, because emo became something weird. To me, weird, I don't know. But really, Sunny Real Estate was the ushering in of this post-hardcore, mix of like punk rock, but like rock and roll, but with this really melodic, like emotional undertone. And I just really love this album. It still means a lot to me today. So that was my number 3.
All right. So my next pick was from my uncle's record collection, and I chose Iggy and the Stooges, Raw Power. This record is weird as fuck. It's got everything you can possibly want. It's got everything you could possibly want. From the moment you hear Search and Destroy, you know that this album is aptly named. It is nothing but pure rock and roll power. And Iggy and the Stooges were so influential on my early musical development, with great songs like Search and Destroy, Give Me Danger, and one of my personal favorites, Your Pretty Face Is Going to Hell. So Iggy and the Stooges was my next choice. These guys rock. They changed my life back in the day. So Iggy and the Stooges, Raw Power.
All right, you're good. You're like getting through.
Yeah.
I'm talking way too much. So next up is a band that I saw at the Little House, and it is Hot Water Music. This is Fuel for the Hate Game. I love a lot of their albums. I actually have their 20-year anniversary, which totally dates me. And it's this beautiful vinyl set. It's all different colored vinyl. It's just beautiful. It's like a greatest hits, I guess. But this album means a lot to me. It actually came out in, I think, 96 or 97. But they came to the Little House where we saw shows on their, basically one of their first tours outside of Gainesville. We went back to Riot Fest. Oliver didn't go with us that year, but we got to see Hot Water Music, and they played an after show at this small club in Chicago, and they sold like limited tickets. It was really awesome. Hot Water Music got tons of energy when you see them live, but like it was just exciting to be in the small room. It reminded me of the days we were at the Little House. We were cramped in this little house and sweating on each other and lots of dancing. Like everybody was dancing together, and it was just it was amazing. But afterwards, we got to talk to Chris Woolard from Hot Water Music, and we were talking about back in the day shows in Biloxi and how much they enjoyed it, how there were all these bands that came from all over to play there. And he was telling us that the reason he found out about it was through this band Tired From Now On, and they used to play shows at the Little House, and he was on tour with them as a roadie and ended up coming to Little House with them and went back to Gainesville and told Hot Water Music about it, and then they came. So this album definitely gives me all the feels. It reminds me of that time period. There's so many songs on this album that I love so much, and still love Hot Water Music, still a fan of their music. So yeah, that was my next choice. You're up.
Okay, so this record, sorry, I disappeared there. This record was very, very important to me whenever I was in high school. It's got everything you could ask for. My selection is the Lemonheads, It's a Shame About Ray. Now, I could have just as easily picked Come On Feel the Lemonheads or something like that, but I think this record was more, it tapped into everything that I needed it to be at that time. It tapped into that teenage angst. It spoke to, the emotional development that you go through as a teenager. Not to get all psychological on you there, but all these songs, I could just about quote them all. They were such a big, huge part of who I was whenever I was a teenager. This was coming at a time when the grunge movement was happening, and these guys were doing something a little bit different, and they were a little bit more emotional, a little bit more songwriter driven, I should say. And there's also an incredible cover of Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel, I believe. I
love Simon and Garfunkel.
Their cover of Mrs. Robinson is insanely good.
I have to check it out.
You've got a lot of great songs on here that are just, whenever I had a flood of emotion whenever I was going through making my selection for this, because I pulled this record out and it dawned on me that this was definitely so important to me whenever I was in high school, so I had to pull this one out.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of us doing this was albums that really,
the feels.
Affected us. Yeah.
The feels. This definitely gives me the feels, with great songs like Hannah and Gabby, which is one of my absolute favorite songs. It's so emotional, and It's a Shame About Ray. I remember the video had Johnny Depp in it.
It's cool that you picked the Lemonheads because, when I picked Sunday to Real Estate, they came out of Seattle where grunge was king at that time. And so bands, it just is a testament to, there were so many layers in the 90s of bands that, weren't what you would imagine. You remember people, when they think of the 90s, they think of the whole ushering of the hair metal, the spandex and big hair into this grunge era. But there were so many bands that were different than that. That were sort of in between. They weren't at the underground level with punk rock and hardcore bands, but they were sort of in between. And so many amazing bands, that people don't even think about when they think about that era.
The Lemonheads, It's a Shame About Ray.
Yeah. So as we round up our final choices, I just wanted to say this obviously isn't all-inclusive of albums that influenced and affected us at that time. For me, and this is going to give away that, what I don't have as my last choice, but, straight edge and hardcore and veganism are very important to me, even now at almost 40.
More important now, even.
Yeah, and so, but and a lot of the ideals, like I was saying before, and morals that I have today are derivatives of what I learned from hardcore and punk rock. And so there are a lot of bands I could have picked. I could have picked Earth Crisis, but also as far as feminism, I was a big fan of this lesbian band called Teen Dresch.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the Riot Girl bands that I used to listen to.
Bikini Kill.
Yeah, and so, there's so many choices, like, of bands that, like, changed who I was, who affected me and made me who I am today, and got me really into, the music that I was into then led me to the relationships I have today, including meeting my husband. So it's all really important and relative, and, but we only could pick 5. That was the parameter.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think this album or this band is going to be any surprise to Oliver, and maybe not to some of you, but my last is The Clash. And it's really not just this album, but any album by The Clash. The first album I actually owned by The Clash was their greatest hits, and it wasn't an album, it was a 4 CD box set. And I listened to it all the time. Oliver knows because we hung out then.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to always say, when I hear The Clash, I'm going to have a good day. I had songs assigned to all my best friends that were all Clash songs. Like, I was a huge Clash fan, like, seriously. So they are one of those bands that never get old to me. They have a lot of people associate The Clash with punk rock. But it's more than punk rock.
Yeah.
It's more than politics. It's more of, their stance on classism and what was happening, at that time. But also, they had such an influence of reggae on their music, and of even some pop and some new wave that came in later on, but especially the reggae.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just a band that's timeless for me, and certainly could not leave them out of influential bands when I was a teenager, because gosh, I listened to them all the time, like probably every day. Another band I could have put on there that I just thought about was Operation Ivy. I listened to Operation Ivy all the time.
Oh my God. Yeah, Op Ivy was totally, yeah, I agree with that. I could have.
So that's another, band that I could have added to the roster. But So who you got for your final?
Well, for my final selection,
I don't think this is a big surprise either.
This is not a big surprise either. This is the end-all, be-all, most important band. This is the band that changed my life, the Ramones. This is their first album, their self-titled first album. And now, suffice to say that this album came out in 1976. This album was also...
cheated.
This album was also, this was part of my uncle's collection, who I inherited after he passed away, and it sat in my collection for the longest time, and I began to notice the Ramones logo on T-shirts, and I'm seeing the members of Metallica wearing Ramones T-shirts and in various places, and I'm like, hey, I've got one of their albums, let me check this out. So I pull it out, and this is probably about 88, 89, maybe 90. I pull it out, put it on the turntable, and from the moment that Blitzkrieg Bop came on, my life changed forever. This changed everything I knew about music up until that point was just sort of canceled out, if you will,
That's my kid's favorite song.
Your kids have good taste. Absolutely.
Yeah, especially when they're singing "Shoot 'Em in the Back Now" in the back of the car.
Shoot 'em in the back now.
That's bad parenting.
No, that's not bad parenting. That's just good music. But anyway, you've got, when you put this on, it's like a buzzsaw of just raw energy, pure rock and roll. This is pure, unadulterated rock and roll. It's not like the music that was around at the time. Now, I can appreciate the fact that this album came out in '76 and the music that was out there at the time, you had Captain and Tennille and Journey and bands like that. And they're all fine and good for what they do, but they all follow a formula. And that's the thing about the Ramones. They broke the mold. Their intention was never to create something underground. Their intention was to sell out. They wanted to create something like what the Beach Boys were doing, what Jan and Dean were doing, what early rock and roll was all about. They wanted to bring that back. And the revolution, who knew that they started a revolution in the process by just simply trying to go back and recreate what they loved about rock and roll. And that resonated with me, even though I couldn't put it into words at the time. I can now as an adult. But it resonated with me. And there was something about that tapping into that raw power. And so my final selection, it was insanely difficult to do, to select just 5 records, because my record collection is so large and there's so many great albums that have meant so much to you and I both. But from this specific time period, and one of them was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I could have very easily gone with Blood Sugar Sex Magic, because that album was so much of a huge part of my teenage years.
So that's our top 5 albums, or 5, not top 5, but 5 albums that influenced us when we were teenagers. If you like this video, be sure to give us a like, thumbs up, so that we know what kind of content to create for our channel. And if you like, hit the subscribe button below. If you subscribe to our channel, you'll get notifications on all the cool videos we're putting out.
And in the comments below, we want to know, what are your 5 most influential albums when you were a teenager. So put those down there. We want to read those. I'm curious to see what else everybody has there.
All right, dudes. Check you later.
See you later.
Bye. Don't be weird. I'm gonna take my clothes.
Let me sit up some. Are we friends?
Oh my God, are you serious? Like, get out my video then.
Get out my video.
So, I'm into some things, different things. I don't know, weird and exciting things.
I don't do anything.
Oliver's into some weird and...
No, I don't do shit. I go to work, I come home, I pay my bills, that's it. Fuck you guys. Sorry. I hope you're editing this.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what I was going to say. Are you going to laugh? Is that funny to you?
A little bit.
Oh my God.
Interrupt me. I will fucking do as I fucking please, and you will deal with it, because I am Oliver, and Oliver can do whatever he wants to do. Do you understand me?
No,
do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Because I don't.
It's annoying me.
It's annoying me too.
Okay. And the lights out.
Grab fork, make first attack. Lights out. Poke your eyes out.
That's no.
Yeah. You fucking douche nugget.
Just erase that video, you'll have more.
Okay, Josh, just come look in the camera and tell me if you can see the glare, because if I sit low, you usually can't see the glare.
Can you see the glare tonight? Hey, you weren't in the fucking picture.
What we might have to do is turn...
You only have 15%. You need to plug your phone in.
Oh my God.
Plug your fucking phone in.
Quit being rude.
Quit being rude. You want to get naked? Let's get naked.
Don't do that! What the fuck is going on? Okay, let me plug in my phone.
We'll put it back on there and let's go. Let's go, motherfucker!
There's some creepy dude in my living room. Can you go away?